This week I had the opportunity to see a friend I haven't seen in quite a while. It's been an exciting time in her life lately with lots going on, a new baby, her second, a new house in a different neighborhood, in-laws moving into a senior community. It's been joyful, but it hasn't been easy. There are financial pressures and health challenges. Acknowledging that she has so much to be grateful for, my friends also said, I know this is ridiculous, I know this really isn't a thing, but I feel like God is punishing me because we now drive to shul and don't walk. I know that's not how it works, but that's how I feel. Hearing this, I had so much compassion for my friend. I know from my own perspective that the challenges of life can be a lot to deal with, can leave us feeling like we demand an explanation for the way things are the way they are. I was glad that my friend doesn't actually believe that God is punishing her for making this choice. And I had empathy and compassion because I relate to that feeling that things can just be so hard sometimes, and we feel like there has to be a reason, a good reason, that we or our loved ones are suffering. And it made me think, how does God work in the world? In my perspective as Jews in the conservative movement, we don't do a whole lot of talking about God. We have a history in the conservative movement of being very open to academic scholarship, scientific reasoning, and ways of understanding reality that are usually found in universities and not yeshivas. It's a wonderful and beautiful thing, but it doesn't, and it shouldn't, take away from the fact that we do focus on Torah, and there are plenty of times when the Torah talks a lot about God. This week in Parashat Shmot, we have some amazing examples of this. We read, Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He drove the flock into the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. A messenger of God, and we usually translate this as angel of God, appeared to him in a blazing fire out of a bush. Moses gazed, and there was a bush all aflame, yet the bush was not consumed. Moses said, I must turn aside to look at this marvelous sight. Why doesn't the bush burn away? When God saw that Moses had turned aside to look, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. So what do we learn about God from the plain meaning of this story? God can appear in a place, a mountain, or a bush. God has messengers, and God can call to us trying to get our attention. God can call to us, creating a sight that makes our heads turn. God can call out to us directly and insistently. Now you might say, well, God called to Moses because Moses was a special guy. God wouldn't call to me or to anyone else. And further, the Talmud actually explains that at the beginning of the time of the second holy temple in ancient Jerusalem, God's spirit, Ruach HaKodesh, departed from the Jewish people. And all we had left that we could still hear was the bat kol, the divine echo. And so what I take from all of this is God's way of relating to us can change over time. Maybe this has to do with history, maybe it varies from person to person, but I think we can read the story of Moses, and we can learn that God can connect with humankind. God wants to connect with humankind, and perhaps God wants to connect personally with us. We read two commentaries in our Eitz Chaim Chumash that speak about the burning bush itself. They note, if a bush is on fire and it's burning but not burning away, a person is going to have to take some time and watch this, visually experience this, before they finally realize something strange is going on. The bush is on fire, but it's not consumed. And the commentaries conclude, connecting with God takes time and patience. We read further in our parashah. God said to Moses, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. So what do we learn about God from this? God's presence can be scary. God's presence can inspire big feelings. If it happened to Moses, it can happen to us, and it's okay if we have big feelings in the presence of God. We actually remember this moment every time we say the opening lines of the Amidah, this moment in Torah. The God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, that phrase in the Amidah, those words are from this very story. We read further in our parashah. God said to Moses, come now, I will send you to Pharaoh, and you shall free my people, the Israelites, from Egypt. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and free the Israelites from Egypt? And God said, I will be with you, That shall be your sign that it was I who sent you." Moses said to God, "When they ask me, 'What is your name?' what shall I say to them?" And God said to Moses, "Ehyeh asher ehyeh," meaning I will be what I will be. Say to them, "Ehyeh sent me to you." And Moses said, "Well, what if they don't believe me and don't listen to me, and instead they say God did not appear to you?" So we learn from all of this, it's okay to question God. We have so many questions for God. To me, Moses in this story is like a curious child asking question after question. And we see in this next part of the story, even if God answers us, we can continue to object. We read, Moses said to God, "Please, God, I've never been a man of words, either in times past or now as you presently address me. I'm slow of speech and slow of tongue." And God said to Moses, "Who gives humankind the ability to speak? Who makes a person deaf or mute, blind or seeing? Is it not I, God? Now go, and I will be with you as you speak and instruct you what to say." And we learn, God can give us instructions, and we can continue to object. Just because God might make the path forward clear for us, we might not see what God sees. We might not accept the instructions. And God makes the point that God has a key role in the unfolding of reality. And we read, "But Moses responded to God, 'Please, God, make someone else your agent, your messenger.' God became angry with Moses, and God said, 'There's your brother Aaron. I know he speaks well. You shall speak to him and tell him what to say. I will be with both of you as you speak, and tell both of you what to do. I will tell you, you will tell Aaron, and Aaron will tell the people.'" And I believe we can learn God can make us an offer we can't refuse. At the same time, God can compromise. God has emotions. God can get angry. But God can be receptive to negotiation. Perhaps we can even learn that God has compassion in the face of our shortcomings, and God will find a way to cut us a break. Now, going back to the beginning of the story, what have we learned about God? God has messengers. God can appear in a place. God can call to us and get our attention. God's presence can inspire big feelings. We can question God. We can object to God. We can decline or refuse to accept what God says. And God can make us offers we can't refuse. But God can do so with compassion. There's this idea in Torah, and we see it here in this story, that God can reach out to us personally. We can have a personal experience of that connection. I think some of us can relate to that idea. We would say we do relate to God in a personal way, and others of us, not so much. We would say we've never had that kind of personal experience with God. Both of these experiences are valid. Both of these experiences are correct. There is great variety among humankind, and that certainly includes spiritual experience. What we need to remember, especially when we're in community, is to accept and respect those experiences that are different from our own, especially when we don't understand them. So this idea of God making us offers we can't refuse. We notice that after all of Moses' objections to taking on the mantle of leadership, God's plan wins out. And if we remember back earlier in the Torah, we remember the book of Genesis. Abraham famously argues with God about the destruction of Sodom. Abraham argues mightily, and Sodom is still destroyed. In both cases, the Torah is clear that God listens to his counterparts in the dispute and is willing to compromise. And in the end, God gets God's way. Rabbi Shais Taub, in his teaching entitled "Honor Your Father and Your Mother," phrases it this way: "If you have a problem with reality, you have a problem with God." I heard this teaching many years ago, and I feel like I'm still working to understand what it means. But what I take from it today is that God continually creates reality. And some days this works out well for me. The sun's shining, the breeze is gentle, there's unity and teamwork. And other days, this doesn't work out well for me. Plans fall apart, people don't listen, my loved ones suffer, and things are hard. But either way, God is making me an offer I can't refuse. I have to accept reality. There aren't any other good choices. In the world of 12-step recovery, we have this concept of living life on life's terms. This concept comes from a well-known story in the world of recovery called "Acceptance Was the Answer." The story relates the experience of one person who says, "Acceptance is the answer to all my problems today. I find serenity when I accept a person, place, thing, or situation as being exactly what it's supposed to be in that moment. Unless I accept life on life's terms, I cannot be happy. Now, this is an interesting perspective. I have a friend who's in recovery. His name is Zach. He's Jewish, and he thinks this perspective is ridiculous. How can acceptance be the answer when the world is so broken? It can't possibly be the right course of action to accept things as they are. Zach has a point. We learn from Moses, we learn from Abraham that we can and should object to God when we have a problem with what's happening. And yet, we learn from the Torah that we don't always get our way. Just because we object doesn't necessarily mean that things will change. And perhaps this is why these conversations about God can feel so circular, can feel so frustrating. If even Moses and Abraham couldn't change God's mind, why should we even bother with the conversation? And what I think today is perhaps the conversation is the point. Perhaps the point is to be receptive to God, to speak and to argue with God, so that God has the opportunity to be receptive to us. When we argue with God, when we object to reality, we are giving God feedback. We see from our learning of the Torah portion today, God is willing to listen and to compromise. Perhaps what we can do is both accept reality and argue against it, being willing to participate in the world and being ready to create change for the better. As we move through Shabbat and into the week ahead, let's remember we can take this perspective into all our relationships. Whether it's in our relationship with God or our relationships with others, we can accept them as they are, and still we can be ready to create change for the better. Shabbat Shalom.